Everyone. Hi, everybody. Mitch Jackson. Welcome to Human Socials, the Human Side Interviews. Today's special guest is Mr. Chris Lema. Chris is someone that I met a couple of years ago. I've been trying to get him on this darn show forever. His schedule is absolutely crazy. But guess what, everyone? We've got Chris here today. Chris, thanks for being on the Human Side Interviews.
Thank you.
Let me introduce you to our audience who is watching the live video feed and our podcast audience. It'll be listening a little bit later on this afternoon, Chris. Chris is the CTO and Chief Strategist at Crowd Favorite. That's a web development, consulting, and app development company, and they're doing amazing things. Chris is also a daily blogger. That's how I met Chris, a public speaker, and a product strategist. He helps companies leverage WordPress and the WordPress platforms for success, for engagement, and for long-term increased profits. And today, Chris and I are going to chat a little bit about membership plugins and membership sites, specifically with the WordPress platform. That's a mouthful. Is that your understanding of why we're here today, Chris?
Well, I thought I was going to sell you Amway, but I'm okay if we want to dig into membership sites instead.
I appreciate that, my friend. Listen, membership sites are pretty cool. It's something that I wasn't really aware of until I started following your blog, until I started paying a little bit more attention to all of the bells and whistles and pros and cons with membership sites. Why don't we do this? Why don't we start off with, can you share with our audience, generally speaking, what is a membership site? What are we talking about?
Sure. Well, I was going to say, a lot of people think of membership sites and they go, oh, I don't really know much about them. Yet, maybe you have used Spotify and paid to have a Spotify Pro account where you pay every single month and you get access to content and you get certain features that no one else gets. That's a membership. Maybe you have used Amazon Prime, where you pay monthly in a subscription format, you get access to protected content, same day or next day delivery for free, but you also get certain video content that other people have to pay for. Gosh, you could go on and on. The reality is anything you're paying for monthly or quarterly or yearly, a lot of associations, I'm assuming you may be an association or two professionally for lawyers, and when you're in an association and you're paying, sometimes all you get in certain associations are discounts. You get to use those coupons to go to an event and you get it priced differently, or you get access to a journal that other people may not get. So the notion is, some people call them membership sites, some people call them subscription-oriented software. There's a lot of different terms, but at the end of the day, we're talking about $18 to $20 billion a year. These are not just mom-and-pop sites that show up. These are the big names you know, but also a whole bunch of little names you don't know. And when people want to get engaged and start building these things, often we find that I find there are people that want to share their information, share their knowledge, share their experience. And one of the most effective ways to do that is by cultivating an audience and then generating the revenue off that audience by putting it behind some sort of paywall.
How can a business tap into membership sites or membership plugins and use a membership site type of platform to help build their business, to help engage their customers, to help share content with people coming to the website?
Great question. You and I may not be political animals, only because we are here in Southern California, but you could imagine if you lived in Washington, D.C., right, the notion of wanting access to critical information, and not just access but timely access, right? So we've probably maybe seen the website Politico. They also have a magazine that reinforces their brand, but Politico Pro is a subscription site that says, hey, you know what, for Politico you can come to our website and that's indexed for SEO, that's what people search for in Google and they get to. But the professionals who want, in different verticals, they want policy information, they want the latest information, they want access to data, but more importantly, they want it early, they want it quick, they want it at 6 in the morning. they're going to pay a pro account for something that someone else may get access to at 10 o'clock in the morning or may not get access to it for several days. So sometimes the simplest dynamic is selling access to information, right? And that's exactly what you use a membership site for, to say I'm going to make this a paywall. I'm going to put a walled garden around it. I'm going to protect this content and make sure that only certain people have access to it, whether we're talking about access to data that other people don't have or access to data earlier than people have.
So for the viewer that may not have, who doesn't feel that they've used a membership site before, they're not familiar with what we're talking about a website where you come to somebody's website and possibly in exchange for providing your name and email address, you might have access to free membership tools, bells and whistles, things that aren't normally available at the website. For a paid subscription, you might have access to premium content, up-to-date content like you were just talking about through that website portal that everyone else isn't going to have access to just by stopping by the website, correct?
Yeah, you and I are happily married, but there are people who are still looking for dates, right?
Okay.
And if you're looking for a date, what are you going to do? You may go to Match.com, and guess what? Match.com is a membership site.
Perfect.
Match.com says, hey, tell me a little about your information. I'm a man looking for a woman. I am 44. I'm looking between 40 and 50. And what do they give you next, right? They don't say, I'm going to ask you 14 more questions. They say, see photos, right? You click see photos. You're like, ooh, instant gratification, right? You see a bunch of photos. They say, hey, you want their information? You want to follow up with them? Give us a little bit more information. Then they say, now you're going to pay for membership, and then you're going to fill out the rest of your profile, and then we're going to give you access to something. Now, again, part of the thing that I stress to people is we tend to think of a membership site simply as let's put a paywall around private content that's educational material, and that is one model. But the reality is, in the case of Politico, you're getting just a different access to certain timed material. In the case of Match.com, you're getting access to people that have essentially aggregated themselves saying, I want someone to know me or notice me, and I'm willing to pay to be in the club, and you pay to be in the club, and now we're going to use sophisticated algorithms like what would you do on a vacation to find one another, right? All of those are membership sites.
You know, that's a really good example, Chris. And for those of you just joining us, I'm speaking with Chris Lema. Chris is a WordPress expert. He's a consultant. He's also a motivational coach. Chris, I've loved watching your speeches across the country, across the world on YouTube, and also at your blog. At your blog, you indicate that you have a section for people interested in membership programs and membership plugins and information like that. You also have some other sections at your blog that I think you emphasize as a WordPress expert. What are those other areas that people would like to stop by and take a look for more information?
Well, on the site, I try and cover a lot of different stuff. Try and put them into a few different buckets. So I give some advice on public speaking, and every now and then I come up with something that's of value. The rest of the time I send them to your site. But there's
not true, my friend. Not true.
There's some because I speak a lot in public, so there's a section there. There's a section on pricing and how you think about pricing, because again, most people really just don't understand how to think through pricing stuff. There's other stuff on e-commerce, but the majority of the reason people show up, other than the fact that I pretty much write every post with a story in it. So some people show up for the stories, other people skip to the second third of the post and start reading there. But a lot of it is what I talk about is how to use WordPress, right? How to use WordPress. It's not a technical site. Some of my technical friends will say, hey, couldn't you go deeper and describe how to do this technically or how to write this code? And the reality is that's not the audience for my site, right? So if you come to chrislema.com, what you're looking for is how do I do something, or why should I do something? And the how we're talking about is how do I assemble some things to make WordPress approachable for me, to make it easy for me? How can I, from a business perspective, leverage some of these technology tools, right? The other day, I think you had Chris Brogan on the call, right, on the interview. And Brogan says, well, I don't talk about being a social expert because that's like saying I'm also a phone expert. I mean, if you're good in sales, you're going to use whatever tool you have, whether it's a phone or it's social. I look at saying, look, technology is here to reinforce and support all the things we want to do, right? If we want to run a business, then we ought to figure out how can we leverage this technology to do it, but not technology for the sake of technology, right? WordPress ends up being one of those platforms that's really easy to use in the overall goal of furthering your business. And so a lot of times what I'm doing is trying to help businesses figure out how to leverage WordPress, how to leverage plugins, the code base, how to leverage other companies to come alongside and help you move your business forward.
Well, as a fellow speaker, as someone that speaks and talks for a living, what I love about your blog, Chris, is that you do share tips, you do share techniques and approaches through storytelling. And half the time I find myself clicking on a heading or a headline to read the content, and I get wrapped up in the story, and I've actually forgotten why am I reading this blog post in the first place until I get to the very end, and then it all comes together. And that's a hat tip to you. It's the way to communicate, and you do an exceptional job doing that. And that's why I've really enjoyed connecting with you over the years. Let's do this. I'm a small business, medium-sized business, or even a large business, and I want to implement a new membership site into our digital platform, into our web, into our blog, whatever it might be. I believe I read on your blog you had a post that had something like 5 or 6 questions you need to ask yourself when deciding which membership plugin to use for your particular product or service. Can you share several of those questions we should be asking ourselves with our audience before they go out and buy and try to use a membership plugin?
Yeah, let's do it a slightly different way, only because if I ask you the question, you may still go, I don't think I understand the question, right? Because, again, it depends on how much you've been reading over my site. But let's do it this way. Let's talk about 7 completely avoidable mistakes that you could skip past when you're building your membership site. Because it's the same form of going after those questions, but instead of saying, here's the question, and then you're left going, I'm not sure I even understand the question, let's just hit the mistakes and say, you don't have to make these, right? Eleanor Roosevelt said, you may not outlive learning from your own mistakes, right? and it's true, right? So let's just learn from other people and go, okay, let's skip through those.
I would love to hear those 7 mistakes that we can all avoid.
So the first one, right, is picking the wrong financial gateway. And for most people, that means not using PayPal. PayPal is really easy. PayPal, you can get something running and working in minutes with PayPal. The challenge is that when you discover that you need features that PayPal can't give you, when you discover that PayPal's charging too much and you want to move on, whatever the reason, and everybody hits that wall eventually, what you discover is that now that you've been running recurring charges or subscriptions through PayPal, when you want to move off of PayPal to something else, you're going to see a huge headache in migrating those subscriptions, and in fact, more often than not, it's so painful that people just spin up the new site or the new system with a new gateway, and then they see 30 to 40% attrition among people that used to pay with PayPal moving to the new gateway. So you make the wrong gateway choice, right? You choose the wrong vendor for your payments, and you can put all the hard effort you want in your site, only to discover that when you make a change, you lose a whole group of them, right? And it's very difficult to get them back. So I highlight or recommend looking at something like Stripe, where you can change tools and infrastructure, and Stripe doesn't change. You can look at authorize.net and realize, okay, I can change tools and infrastructure and not get stuck in the same way that native PayPal gives you. So that's mistake number 1.
And real quick, Chris, great tips. And what I really like about your blog is on this topic, for example, you'll go through and you'll discuss why you like or dislike or the pros and cons of different options in a single blog post on a specific issue from a very independent point of view.
Yeah, because I don't sell a membership plugin myself, right? In fact, what's happened these days, it's kind of funny, Mitch. The guys who are either building it or getting ready to build one will now call and say, okay, give me the full download. I want to do it right because I just want to deliver value for my customers. You seem to have a pulse on those people, and they're all interacting and relating to you and talking about your site, so just tell me what I have to build. And so we've seen in the last 2 years a couple entrants that have stepped into the market, and they kill it right away. And you go, yeah, they kill it. I mean, I like them right away because they're
Right.
solving all those problems that other plugins used to not solve.
Yeah, and I was just going to suggest that people check this out because it's a unique technique that you're using, a unique technique. Okay, but what you do is you share with us 4 or 5 options. You explain the pros and cons of each option. When you do have an interest or a friend that owns a company and that's one of those options, you disclose it clearly. So that's very much appreciated, and it's very helpful as a user. And the new visitors to your blog site are going to appreciate that technique. So we've covered the avoidable mistake number 1. What's number 2, Chris?
Mistake number 2 is don't collect customer credit cards on your own infrastructure, on your own site. So you want to think about storing them in a vault, a centralized hosted environment that your gateway provider provides, which again, sometimes depending on what service you have with PayPal doesn't work, but Stripe supports it, Authorize.net supports it, several others support it. And the reason for that is because if you're hosting your site on something that's inexpensive and someone breaches your infrastructure, meaning someone hacks your site, which they may have hacked the server because of some host. It may not be related to you at all. They're not picking on you specifically. They're just running these computerized robots against all of the sites on that host. If they break in, now you have to disclose that to your customers. And I think we've all received those letters recently with the issues with Target. You can imagine what happens when you get a letter that, one of your customers gets a letter and says, we may have had a breach, your data may have been exposed, we're not sure, right? Say goodbye to that revenue stream, right? Because people are going to close down and move on. So don't store it on your own infrastructure. Use a provider that actually stores it. And Stripe does this, Authorize.net does this. There's an ancillary benefit to this. If you are storing your customer data in one of those customer vaults behind one of those infrastructures, they will often give you a dedicated link to that person to be able to upsell or cross-sell something with a single click because they already know the person. So let's say Mitch comes to my site and you come and you buy a $5 ebook. And then I send you another email that says, hey Mitch, what you really want is my specialized course, and it's $99. Now imagine if you click the link and then go into a page where you had to fill in your information and fill in your credit card and click. I'd lose 72% of you, right? Not going to be a good day for me. Imagine on the other hand I say, hey Mitch, thanks for buying that book. I think you might like the rest of this, and all you have to do is click this link and you're in. Because I already know all your information, right? Because the vault has kept it all. And so that one-click upsell or that one-click cross-sell can be very, very profitable for you. So the mistake is storing it locally. There's a lot of upside if you don't.
Before we go to number 3, Chris, I did come by your site earlier today, and I picked up and downloaded the book. It's an ebook, everyone, and it looks really good. I got through the first couple of pages before I had to take a call. I'm going to finish it this weekend, but it's Creating a Done Culture, the 12 Habits of High Performers and What It Means for You as a Leader. So it sounds to me, Chris, like I might be getting an email this weekend for maybe a follow-up product. Is that right?
No.
Okay.
I have not turned those into funnel objects, so you're
Not
free
yet.
and clear. You're good. No problem at all.
All right. But it looks really good, Chris. I can't wait to read it. Later on, I think it's either next week or the week thereafter, I've got Alex Holden on the show. Alex is the cybersecurity expert written up in Fortune, Success Magazine. He's the guy that discovered the $1.2 billion emails and passwords stolen in the Target matter relating to the Home Depot. We're going to talk about the Sony Pictures hack. We're going to talk about the Anthem Blue Cross hack. So it's a really good idea from a legal standpoint to outsource to a third-party resource like Chris just mentioned. Anytime you're dealing with merchant accounts, anytime you're dealing with money, any type of financial transactions, get that off your desk into a third party, and it'll protect yourself financially. And that's not legal advice, and I am a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. So just keep that in mind, everybody. Number 3, Chris.
Number 3, don't release all of your content at once. So a lot of people will create a membership site, and they'll say, once you log in, look at all that you have access to everything, right? And this is something that people learn the real hard way, because normally those same sites, because someone you got advice from someone, you probably put some money back guarantee on your offer page. So you probably said, hey, come back within 15 days if you're not happy, and I'll give you 100% of your money back. So what happens? They buy, they log in, and they download everything. I mean, the truth is, not only can I pay someone in Bangladesh $1 to $2 an hour to do it for me with my login and credentials, but I can run bots, automated tools to do it. So I go in and I scrape 400 pages worth of content. I pull down every download, every PDF, everything. I pull it all down to my box, and what do? 2 hours later, I send you an email saying, you know what? I looked around. This isn't for me. I'd like a refund. And you give them your refund, and they walk away with all your content. Right? And if that's the worst that happens, right, that's still a bummer. But even worse is they take all that content, they put it up on their own site, they start selling that content, and you don't know because it's behind a paywall and you can't get behind there and you don't even know it exists. So what you want to do is something called when you're doing this process, you're doing something called content dripping, where you're going to release some amount of information today, some amount of information a week or a month from now, some amount of information later. And so what happens is you're creating a reason for your site to be sticky. You're creating a reason for people to come back. And by the way, right, engagement is everything. So if people aren't coming back, in fact, it's not one of the classic mistakes, but it's right up there. If you send a welcome email and then people don't show up, if they're not logged in within 3 days, forget about it, right? You can expect to give them their money back. You can expect that they're going to file something. You can expect eventually they're going to terminate the account. You want to send emails every single day for the first 3 days, just trying to drive that engagement, get them back in, because once they log in, they're committing themselves. If all they did was give you money, you think they're committed. They're not necessarily committed, right? But don't release, whatever you do, don't release all of your content all up front. You'll thank me later for that one.
Great tip, Chris. Number 4.
Number 4 is when you get so focused on building a membership site that that's all you do, right? The reality is people want community. People want to feel like they belong. Again, Chris, you had Chris on the show last week, I think, and he said they're looking for a place to belong. And one of the things Chris did a couple of years ago was I joined his writing group, and the first thing they did when I paid and signed up was they didn't say, okay, here's where you can find the protected downloads or whatever. They said, well, we're putting you into a Facebook group. And I said, Facebook group? I don't know if I want to be on a Facebook group. Oh, my goodness. Not only did I get in that Facebook group, I started hanging out with some of those guys. And Chris, to give him credit, Chris was honest, said, I'll come in every now and then. So it wasn't that people were hanging in there waiting for Chris. People were in there hanging to interact with each other, right? People want a sense of belonging. They want a community. And if you just build information, right? If you build protected access to content and information, and you forget that people want more than that they want to belong, they want a sense of community, you're gonna lose out. So the best way you do that, and I was just at a conference this last week where they did the same thing. I signed up and they said, okay, go and ask to be part of our protected community, our protected group in Facebook. And then we'll give you access. And I went and clicked and said ask to be in there, and you see thousands of people, right? And all of a sudden you feel like I'm part of a tribe, I'm part of a group, I belong somewhere, I can interact with people. So mistake number 4, don't build just a membership site, right? Build a way for people to connect and feel like they're part of a community.
That's a very effective, it's good advice and a very effective approach. I also did that with one of Chris Brogan's groups. I think it was Brave and a couple of other ones, and it does build community. You're instantly part of a community sharing common interests, common passions. Do any of the membership plugins, Chris, that you either use or you recommend, do they include any type of community-based software? So I don't have to be sent out to Facebook or a Google Circle type of community. Is there anything that's full turnkey?
They do. A lot of them will interact with a forum that you can build on your own site, etc. But here's the problem, all right? Then you got to really have a compelling reason for people to log back in and check each day. Whereas most people are still logging in and checking Facebook each day, right? Or at least there are other reasons for them to be in Facebook. And so because there are other reasons for them to be in Facebook, when they see that little red dot or that little number that says, look, there's 14 new things that happened, you're like, oh, well, let me go check my club, right? So I recommend that you do it in Facebook, even though Facebook's interface is kind of clunky and not perfect and all that. Again, this is not a technology take, right? This is you're trying to build a business or a dynamic. The faster you can get people already where they're hanging out, to assemble and feel connected, the better off you are, which is why I think the Facebook approach really works well.
Sounds fantastic. Fantastic. That is good advice because they're logging into Facebook or Google Plus or some of the other platforms also.
Yep.
I don't know if you've used Slack. I was watching Tim Ferriss interviewing the gentleman that helped create WordPress.
Yeah. Matt Mullenweg.
Right, and they use Slack, I guess, internally, which is the same type of process, and we're starting to use that in some of our different communities. It's a pretty cool little program that people may want to check out. I don't know if you use it or not or recommend it.
It is. I'm in 5 different Slack communities, and one of our communities is a whole group of WordPress experts that I hang out with, and one or two of them said, hey, can we spin up a Slack for wives? And so now my wife is with a whole bunch of their wives in another group, which is bad news for me, right? Because I could previously get away with, hey, that conference is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and get back Wednesday night, when in fact it ends Wednesday morning at like 9 a.m. And so she'd be like, hey, where are you now, right? She hears from the other people, they're coming home Wednesday noon. I'm like, well, I was going to have a lunch with a friend, and like that's not part of the conference. Get home. And
that's why if you have a good lawyer, you don't have to worry about that. I understand. You're so transparent in everything. You've got everything online. But what's interesting is we're using it to mentor young trial lawyers on trial techniques.
Awesome.
I've got another Slack group we're setting up which has to do with communication tips and things like that. It's a pretty cool platform. I just wanted to share it with our audience in case they're not already using it. Chris, so that I know you're on a limited time budget right now, what's the next avoidable mistake that people need to pay attention to when looking at membership site options?
Number 5 is focusing only on content protection. So normally when you're evaluating a plugin or a platform, you're going to look at, okay, can I put my videos behind a paywall? Can I put my PDFs behind? And you're just focusing on protecting your content. When in reality, likely that customer base is also going to want to buy your ebook. They're going to want to sign up for you to potentially ship them T-shirts to be part of your club or whatever, right? So it's not just about, okay, what's the solution that just does this one thing? Because the very next moment when you say, oh, could I also sell T-shirts, right? Which is that's not a big deal, right? You're like, hey, can I wear? And then the membership plugin says, well, we don't do that because we just do membership. And you're like, well, I'm running a business, right? I didn't start a membership site so that I could pontificate on the benefits of a membership site. I started a membership site for my business, and then now I want to sell a physical product. And I can't do it. Or you're building an association site and you're like, I want to sell tickets to an event. You're like, well, we don't do tickets, right? So it's a classic mistake. You show up saying, I want to do A, but in the back of your head, you already know there's B and C coming. Have that thinking, have that strategy to plan those things out so that when you pick a solution, you're picking a solution that will grow with you.
I love it. I mean, anytime you plan ahead, long-term planning is what it's all about. And I think that's a really important tip, Chris. Thank you. Next.
Number 6. There are a lot of people that use membership sites for more than what we think they'll use them for, right? If you think of your Kindle or if you think of your Amazon account, you sign up, you create one account, you're done. If you think about Match.com, you're going to create one account and be done. But when you start thinking about protecting content, right, you start thinking about video programs or other courses. Imagine if you ran a course for those young trial lawyers, right, and they're running it through. But then one of them jumps out from the pack and wants to take your advanced course. They're going to need access to concurrent accounts. They're going to need to be able to join 2 of your membership clubs at the same time, right? And a lot of solutions don't support this. They'll say, oh, you need to sign up with a totally different email, you need to sign up with something different, or we just don't let you do it. Maybe our financial gateway only allows for one credit card with one account and one amount. And you're like, this is I'm bonkers because I designed something where, Chris Brogan's courses, right? Maybe you join Brave, but then you want to join something else. Imagine if Chris called you and said, sorry, you can't. Right? You're like, what does that mean? Well, you have to use a totally different account. Now you're looking for different emails to try and do different things. And most people still only have one, right? So you want to make sure that whatever you're building on, you're asking the question, if someone comes and they want to register for 2 of my options, right, which normally is not like, silver, gold, platinum, but it's more like, my WordPress 101, my WordPress 201, and my WordPress 301 classes, and what if I want to still be in one and buy the second one now? You want to be able to support concurrent accounts with one user, right? And that's one of those things that you're going to have to dig into because most of the platforms don't support that.
I'm going to put you on the spot later and ask you which ones do, if any. And I've got to ask that question once we're done with going over number 7 with respect to avoidable mistakes. But I wasn't aware of that. And we're setting up some platforms for 2015, some membership sites along the lines of what you just described. And so I'm glad you brought that up because I had no idea there were limitations.
When you're setting that up, you need to ping me, and then I'll be more than happy to help you get set up.
I appreciate that. And no, I will. I'll take you up on that. You know me, I'm not shy. Okay, number 7. What's the last mistake that people are making that they don't need to make?
Yep, is building on the wrong platform, right? So I am a strong proponent of using WordPress. If you're doing anything, right? If you're using Infusionsoft, it connects to WordPress. If you're building out a video course, you can run it on WordPress. You can do anything with WordPress, and a bunch of the vendors out there are supporting WordPress. But there are still private, protected, specific, membership-oriented solutions that aren't WordPress. They are their own. And what you discover is people, they start with it, right? They're like, okay, look, check this out. This looks so cool. And one of the examples I use a lot is a platform called Kajabi, right? And Kajabi is like, hey, you can create a membership site really easily. And then you discover after you're in it that, oh, every time I want to spin up a new course, I got to pay some more. And every time I want this customer to do this other thing, I got to pay extra. So you discover that financially you can't support the growth you want, or you discover platform-wise there are other sites that host all the content, and what if you cancel? Do you get access to pull that down? And maybe you get access to pull some of the content down, but not the rest. So you want to own your content. You've worked hard to develop that expertise. You have that knowledge. You're translating that knowledge into a business, and when you're making that business, you want to make sure you're using an open platform that allows you to choose it, also allows you to grow with it, and allows you to leave it if you need to. And anytime you pick something where you don't have full control of your content and you have a hard time growing or you have a hard time leaving, it's time to move on. So you can figure that out way before you start. It's one of the reasons why I'm a strong advocate of WordPress.
And I think I am too. WordPress has just been an awesome platform for people that are, I happen to be a professional that does something completely different than building websites and blogs and doing social media, but WordPress has helped me efficiently do that and post things immediately that other lawyers and professionals aren't using because they have outside services doing it. Hey, Chris, real quick, I want to ask you about recommended plugins, but before I do that, I think what's important is I've seen some friends of mine with really cool products, really cool downloads and video courses and things like that, but nobody knows about them. In other words, having a kick-ass website and membership site's one thing, but getting it out there into the public, letting the public know about it, sharing it, marketing it, building relationships about it, I mean, that's another interview or video for another time. But can you just touch a little bit about, you set up your membership site, you've got it rocking and rolling the way you want, you've got the best content in the world, but that's only the first step, right?
Yeah, and frankly, I would submit it's the second step. If you haven't built an audience, if you haven't built a community that values what you do and how you do it, you're going to build a product that goes nowhere, right? So oftentimes I'll tell people, spend 6 months building a community before you even start thinking about building that product. The other thing you'll discover is you think you know what a customer wants. You think you know what a community wants until you spend 6 months in that community. And then you discover that the problem you thought you were solving is not the problem they're having. And if they're not having that problem, no one's buying what you're selling. So build in, invest. I mean, again, I'm in the WordPress community. I went to this conference this last week that was completely unrelated to WordPress, and I walked up to buy a product that was related to funnels and landing pages and whatever, and I walked up, and the 2 guys there that were ready to take my credit card are like, hey, Chris Lema. And you're like, they're like, yeah, and I looked at my name tag, and it was flipped over, so they knew me, but they didn't, I mean, it wasn't from my name tag. They're like, oh, we follow your blog, we've seen your stuff, we know your stuff, but if I'd gone to that conference 3.5 years ago, or even 3 years ago, right, they wouldn't have known me at all, right? So I've spent the last several years building a community, building a following, building relationships, building networks, all the stuff you're talking about, building a brand that allows you then, if you decide that one of the strategies you want is to monetize that brand, you can, because you are trusted to deliver some things of value. Today, if people have membership questions, they head over to my Clarity account and they call me and they pay per minute to get answers specifically for their situations. But that's only possible because you've built the brand and the community that you're part of. You don't want to start by building the membership site just because you're like, look, I have great content. Start by building the community, start by building the following, and then monetize it.
That's just great advice, Chris. I mean, I've watched authors, I was around before the internet, and I watched friends of mine who actually were fairly well-known authors write a book and then put it out there. And I watched how that process worked back in the day. Today, when I watch best-selling authors put their material out, they're on the road 6, 8, 12 months before the book's even ready, and they promoted the heck out of it. And then when the book hits the stands, boom, everything pops. It's just a completely different approach to marketing that type of product. But yeah. Chris,
And I'll tell you, it's crazy when you look at that particular process, right? Yeah. Amazon counts pre-orders a certain way, right? And so you'll have authors who are like, hey, pre-order 10 copies of my book, pre-order 20 copies of my book, right? We'll do all these things because on day one, if there's the right amount of traction and interaction, it goes to the best-selling list, right? It shows up at the top. Right. And then everything cascades from there, right? But that means you got to do all the work up front, right? And it's the same thing for a membership site.
Yeah, and what's kind of cool, though, is if they've done the work up front the right way, you actually want to go to bat for these guys and gals and help them. I mean, I can't tell you the books I've purchased and given out to friends just to help somebody I like.
Absolutely.
And, let's do this. And you happen to be one of those people I like, so when you're ready to put out your next book, you better let me know because I'm going to help promote the heck out of it. But Chris, for companies interested in incorporating membership sites into their websites, let's start maybe with lawyers, with accountants, with service providers. Are there any particular membership plugins, membership products that you talked about that you might recommend that might accommodate that type of service industry?
Yep, absolutely. There's a company called iThemes. And if you go to ithemes.com, there is a product there called Exchange, and the Exchange product suggests itself as a e-commerce platform, and it even supports digital downloads. It supports physical sales of some physical products that you ship, but it has an extension, and Exchange is free, but it has an extension you pay for that does the membership stuff and the recurring and recurring subscription billing, and it integrates with Stripe, and it has a gateway for Stripe. It's my favorite because, again, if you're a professional, then you spend your days, and you know this, right, Mitch? You spend your days doing lawyer work, right? If you have to become a web developer to put up your site, there's a problem, right? You're like, look, my expertise is not in web development, and I don't want to have to learn web development. So iThemes has cornered the market in creating really easy to use products, and so by all means, if you are a professional and you're looking to build a membership site, but you also want that potential to sell a physical product or to just do a digital download, you're going to want to look at iThemes Exchange, and it's fantastic. There's a lot that I could say about it. I've written about it as well. There are others. If you're not doing any digital download, if you're not doing any e-commerce, anything that is physical product, if you're just building a membership site, memberpress.com is another great option. Does a lot of powerful things. Very, very, very useful. And then, of course, right, just because I happen to work there, I'll tell you about it. At Crowd Favorite, we build and can build membership sites that are far larger and far more complicated. So if you head over to Disney's D23.com, D23.com is a fan site for Disney people, right? It's nerdy to say that you're an adult and a Disney person, right? But I'll still raise my hand. And it turns out there's it turns out there's 5 million other people raising their hands, right?
Right.
And they've created a membership site, or we've come alongside and helped them build out a membership site that leverages WordPress, that leverages membership, and that allows them to do a lot of different things. When you're big like that, you need a company that understands how to build a membership site that scales. And that's why I'm the CTO and chief strategist over at CrowdFavorite, because we work on really big accounts like that. So there are definitely, if you do it yourself or you're working with a young developer to build out something, you want to look at iThemes Exchange, you want to look at MemberPress. If you are a larger organization and you want to build out something rather complicated and it has to scale to that kind of number of that kind of traffic, then you'd hit me up directly and we'd get you plugged in at CrowdFavorite.
That's great advice. You know what's really cool is at your blog you actually evaluate all the different plugins, and for the different needs. Do you need a plugin to download something, or a membership plugin to help sell and distribute videos? There are different needs and different wants and desires. What about professional sports franchises, Chris? Are you guys handling anything like that, or are there products?
I actually I just got off a call with AS Roma, which is the largest club soccer team in Italy, as we're pitching them on a project, and I've friends of mine that worked directly on the Mavs.com, the Dallas Mavericks NBA team, and I've helped them with their hosting, getting their hosting infrastructure in place, because that's stuff that has to scale, because if you're an NBA team going into the playoffs, right?
Sure.
You're going to get a lot of traffic. So when you're looking at those organizations, features are one part of it, but features are really secondary to scale, right?
Sure,
you don't build a scalable solution by chance. You have to plan it out, and you don't build something that will take tens of thousands of visitors a minute, an hour, a day. You don't build that solution on your first time, right? So again, I've been doing enterprise software for 20 years. And it helps to have that track record so that when you step into the enterprise and you're working on something of scale, you can say, listen, I'm even going to tell you no on some of those features, because the very feature you're asking for is going to give you a big problem on scale. It won't matter if the first 5 people can interact with it, because everybody else won't be able to. And that comes with experience.
Well, you mentioned a European soccer team, and I wasn't going to go into this, but if you have just a couple of minutes, a lot of people may have been thinking we're talking about membership plugins that can be used globally, and I would imagine most of them can, but when you're talking globally, you've got VAT issues, and you've written about that. VAT, yeah. Everybody. Can you just briefly share with everyone who's planning a membership site that may involve a geographic area larger than the United States, and in fact into Europe, what do they need to know about VAT, and how can they deal with that issue?
So the reality is we've had VAT for a while. It's just value-added tax, and value-added tax is simply a way to charge you more money. and if you are for the longest time, it was focused on folks in Europe and unrelated to us at all, right? So if you bought something from here and you bought it over there, it was no big deal. But if you were over there and you bought it in another country, then it was a big deal, and you paid VAT. They instituted some changes to the laws that went effective January 1st of this year, 2015, and it stipulated that basically everybody is responsible, and it shifted where the responsibility lied. In the U.S., right, we have the same kind of dynamic. You probably don't know this, or well, you do, but other people don't know this, that if you and I buy something from another state on an e-commerce website, they may not charge us tax, but that doesn't stop us from owing a certain amount of tax to that state, and potentially the city and what other municipalities are collecting any tariff. And so it's in the U.S., it's always been on the buyer's responsibility to cover that and to pay that back and to send in checks, whatever. Most of us never send in a check. There was some Main Street legislation that was trying to move through stuff in the U.S. That was attempting to shift the basis from being something that end users worry about to something that store owners worry about. And for the longest time, it got pulled out of the legal books by calling it the web was just an extension of catalog business, and so they could get away with this dynamic. Well, So far, they haven't passed it, but you can imagine what happens if a store owner has to be responsible, because now the store owner has to know where you're from, what city you're in, are there city, state, other taxes that you have to worry about, small jurisdictions within a city that you have to pay attention to, and collect centrally from your one spot wherever you're hosting e-commerce. Well, that's essentially what's happened with VAT in Europe. So they're saying now there's going to be a collection, and the store owner is going to have to be responsible, and the store owner is going to have to collect. And if you collect in England, it's one rate, and if you collect in Italy, it's another rate, and if they come to you from Spain, it's another rate. And that means you have to collect it. On top of which, you have to send invoices, and those invoices have to show the percentage in the collection, what have you. And then you have to send a portion of that back to Europe. So you can imagine there's a whole group of people that say, listen, they will never be able to go after us. They will never be able to find us and catch us, so just ignore it. That's one camp. You could choose to live in that camp. There's another camp that says, I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna restrict who can buy from me. So maybe I'm only gonna sell to people in England, but nowhere else. Or I'm not gonna sell to Europe. You have to have a U.S. address to buy, and so that's the way I'm gonna mitigate the issue. And the third group says, I want to sell worldwide, and I want to handle this. Now I'm gonna have to solve this some other way. And what's nice in the WordPress community across most of the products that do WordPress plugins for e-commerce is that they've all started integrating with a tax solution, right? So whether you're talking about WooCommerce or you're talking about Easy Digital Downloads or any of these guys, they've started handling it by saying, what we're going to do is we're going to integrate with a company like Taxamo, Taxamo, and so now the website, when someone hits you, is interacting with your, say, WooCommerce, but inside of WooCommerce, when it goes to do the invoice, it collects the address, it sends that off to Taxamo through a back-end integration. Taxamo does the calculations, whatever. Taxamo sends the invoice. You also have to store these records for 10 years. Taxamo saves it and then sends it back to you, and you collect the money and you're done. And so that kind of integration is possible. When you interact with these products, you'd want to ask them, are you supporting or do you integrate with a tax provider that will mitigate my VAT issues? And they will either say yes or no.
Hey everybody, is this guy amazing or what? And I'm talking about Chris right there. I mean, that's, you at the beginning of our interview, you talked about planning ahead. And when you brought up the European soccer team and that, if you're planning on doing business globally, you need to be aware of these issues. If you deal with these issues now, using some of the resources that Chris has just shared, you can set yourself up to almost automate away a lot of the headaches that you're going to have if you don't plan ahead. And that's critical if you're planning on selling product in Europe and frankly around the world, because I do see that change, unfortunately, continuing to snowball. And we'll see what happens. Chris, listen, if people, you've got a busy speaking schedule, you're always traveling. What's on the near horizon?
I am home.
Lema? What are you doing?
I am home until Wednesday, so that's good, right?
Until Wednesday, okay. And then where are you headed off after Wednesday?
And then after Wednesday, I head to a conference in Las Vegas, the tail end of this month, and then I'm home for several weeks until we do a WordPress event down here in San Diego the last weekend of March. And then I have a couple more conferences, some of which I'm going to, others of which I'm speaking at. I don't think I'm speaking again until twice in May, so there's a little bit of a lull, which is nice. I try and do my schedule. I try and pack it for a series of weeks where we just go bap bap bap, and then try and take a month or two downtime to hang out back with the family and the kids and relax a bit, and then schedule it in. It gets crazy sometimes when you start throwing in the extra, like I didn't plan for that, into the the down months, but so far right now it's looking pretty good.
And what you'll find is there's also the backyard swimming pool and barbecue syndrome. Okay, in the summer months in Southern California, that's when you need to scale back on speaking and spend more time in the backyard floating around, enjoying cold beverages and
That's
good
right.
food.
I don't know if you've seen my new series, Mitch, on Facebook, but I'm posting pictures of famous people who are going down my slide, because we just finished the pool in the backyard a couple weeks ago. So, Mitch, when you get down here, we got to get you on the slide and then get that video up to Facebook.
Dude, I'm all over it. I'll go down that slide like no one's ever gone down before. Sounds like a game plan. Chris, if people want to reach out and connect with you or connect with any of the companies that you're involved with, what's the best way for them to do so?
Twitter is easy. I'm at Chris Lema, ChrisLema. On Facebook, I'm / Chris Lema or / Mr. Chris Lema if you're looking for the page. On my blog, it's at chrislema.com because I'm really original here. On YouTube, I'm at Mr. Chris Lema, and then of course you can check us out at crowdfavorite.com as well.
I love it, Chris. First of all, thanks for being on the Human Side interviews today. I really appreciate it. Great stuff, great material, and I encourage everyone to connect with Chris online at all of those different platforms. I did a couple of years ago after I think we first connected through Chris Brogan, and it's the best thing I've done when it comes to any of my WordPress needs. And I hope you know I'm always there for you, Chris. We've been able to scratch each other's back and help each other out over the years, and it's always been a pleasure.
Yeah, I try to make sure that I don't need your help.
Prior preparation prevents piss poor performance, like you just said.
Exactly.
We plan ahead, and then we're just friends sliding down slides in people's backyards, right?
That's right. That's
okay.
right.
Well, Chris, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining us. I'm Mitch Jackson. That was Chris Lema. We're on the Human Side interviews, and remember, as you roll into the weekend, always remember to make today your masterpiece. Thanks, everyone, and goodbye.